And what is up? And welcome to DLF. Brand new show. We got an AMA here, and we are obviously, as we've been doing for a little while now, we're taking your questions, we're interacting. Like, we want to hear from you. And to do that, we want to bring on some smart football people who are doing great things in the industry so that you can get better at your Dynasty leagues, because we are brought to you by Dynasty League Football. If you don't have a current premium membership, make sure you go check that out. There's a lot of incredible tools there at dynastyleaguefootball.com to help you out. So make sure to check that out if you get a chance, and we'll talk a little bit about more about that at the end of the show. Another great site is footballguys.com, and we just happen to have the rising star Dave Kluge, who is joining, or Kluge,
yeah,
Kluge, who's
right.
joining
Nobody
us.
Gets
man,
it right on the first time.
Yeah, he's got a great show that he's doing there with with Lauren. He's got other shows he's doing with some great people as well. And tomorrow there's a brand new show too. So tell us a little bit about that, everything you're doing, and where we can find you.
Yeah, I mean, I tell everyone just to follow me on Twitter. That's the easiest way to see what I've got going on. Obviously, I do quite a few guest spots, and if you follow me on Twitter at Dave Kluge, you'll be able to see all of that. But right now, when you're looking at the schedule, I am on 4 days a week. Monday is my prep day, so you're not going to find me on any shows on Monday. But Tuesdays in the afternoon at 12 p.m. Eastern, I'm with Stepmom Lauren. And then on Wednesdays, I've got an 8:30 p.m. show with Troy King, where we're doing the mailbag for football guys. On Thursday, I've got a show that I do by myself with 2 guests every single week called The Launchpad. That's just an independent project that I work on. And then on Friday, Steffi Smalls with Our Friday Show. And that is where we try to bring on some really fun guests. And it's more of like a get to know, we're not diving deep into analysis, just kind of getting to know some people. We've had some fantastic guests over the last few months, and we've got plenty booked for the rest of the off season. So you can find me Tuesday through Friday hosting shows nowadays. It's been pretty wild. You're muted, Cal.
Oh, gosh, look at me doing that, messing it up. Basically, just at any point between like 7 and 9, if you scroll through Twitter, like, you are probably going to have somebody retweet you live on your feed. So yeah, just do that. Like, Dave is really killing it, doing a great job over there. And, one of the new members, as I mentioned, at Football Guys. And as part of that, he's doing a ton of analysis. And so we brought him on. We're going to talk a little bit about some players who are right now being overlooked in dynasty leagues that we should be paying attention to. And for one reason or other, they're being overlooked. And we're also going to ask some fun questions and some fantasy questions, maybe some other questions. We may even have a couple of surprises that Dave doesn't even quite know about yet that we might get to at the end of the show. I saw Jordan in here already saying we're about to get Kluge. Dave, if you had to define what the word Kluge meant, what does it mean?
And people ask me this one all the time, and I don't even know. I don't know if you're familiar with the Open Bar. Shout out J Mike and FF Man Bun. Those dudes are amazing. Mike and Gabe. I went on that show and I had no idea what I was getting into. I had, every show I'd done up until that point was something where I had studied up for, taken some notes, gone into it. And one day Gabe reaches out to me and he's like, "Hey man, I've been seeing you all over the place. Any chance you want to come on the Open Bar?" And I said, "Sure. What time do you guys air?" Gives me the time. And I say, "All right, when can I inspect a show sheet?" And he just thought that was the funniest thing ever. And I didn't realize I was getting into 2 hours of slamming drinks and no show sheet and just off the cuff. And that's just kind of where this whole Kluge thing started from. It was, how do I pronounce my last name? And then it just kind of worked itself into a brand of its own. I wish I can tell you what it meant, but I don't know.
Those guys are so much fun. I went on last week on the Open Bar, and I'm so much like you. Like, I like to have like a show sheet, like, know where we're going. That doesn't mean we have to stick to it, right? Like, but as I say all the time, like, you can't go off script if you don't have a script. You have to have somewhere to start, and then you can go off. That's fine, but have an idea of what we're going to do. So we mentioned it. Also, Steffi Smalls in the house. Appreciate her checking in. But we mentioned we're going to have some questions. And right off the bat, Mitch chimes in. How big do you think the gap between Michael Pittman and Corey Davis is? What's your valuation of these two receivers? Kind of, certainly if we're thinking about undervalued, those are two that you can get pretty late in your drafts right now. What are you thinking about those two guys, and how would you rank them, and how big is the gap?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question right off the bat. When you told me, hey, try to make sure you have a couple guys that you feel like are overlooked, the number one guy that I put down on my list was Michael Pittman.
Hmm.
So I'm a big Corey Davis fan. I went to high school right outside the Chicago suburbs. I was just in the same conference as Corey Davis. So I've been watching that kid play since high school. Huge fan of him. But if I had to choose one between the other, I'm definitely leaning towards Michael Pittman
Hmm.
because Corey Davis, great college athlete. Don't want to take away from anything that he did at Western Michigan. But he's just never really been able to take over as the de facto number one. And now on the Jets, I feel like that's what they're hoping for him is to be that de facto number one. And I don't know if he's got it cut out for him. That being said, Michael Pittman looked great last year, even after getting off to a slow start and dealing with injured reserve and all that. And then on top of his injuries and his struggles, he also had to deal with a old noodle-armed Philip Rivers. And still, on the back half of the season, averaged, I believe it was 50 something yards per game. Sorry, 47.1 yards per game. And he's somebody that I think is going to really step up. I know a lot of people are in love with Paris Campbell, and I think Paris Campbell's a great player.
Hmm.
But I think that Michael Pittman, he's got the size, he's got the speed, and then you've got T.Y. Hilton, who I think is just really playing on one leg at this point. I'm not expecting too much from him. So
Right.
between those two, I'm definitely giving the edge to Michael Pittman. He's a guy that I am much higher on than the consensus.
And I'm surprised to see that actually he's going off the board in Dynasty as the wide receiver 40. That seems a little higher than I expected. And Corey Davis is at 48. So, I would have thought that was flipped. I would have thought that drafters would be taking Corey Davis a little bit higher. I I have more expectations, I think, right now for the Jets offense, maybe than the Colts. Like maybe that's crazy. I don't know. You tell me, Dave. Is it crazy to think that the Jets with a brand like they got one of the LaFleur brothers learning from a Shanahan, so bringing over that West Coast offense. I don't know what to think about Zach Wilson yet. He looks like a guy that you're familiar with. In my opinion, I think he looks a lot like Jay Cutler. But
Yeah,
could
great comp.
that, like Jay Cutler wasn't bad for fantasy and the fantasy weapons, was he?
No, I mean, he was fantastic, especially when he was in Denver. His demise started when he came to Chicago, who didn't
Mm.
have an offensive line. This man was sacked 11 times in his final year in Denver, took 87 sacks his first 2 years in Chicago. And when you're taking a whooping like that, it's going to mess with your head. And it started to mess with his head. And he was thrown off his back foot. You saw it. He was just regressing week by week in Chicago, unfortunately. So I don't know, man. Like we've seen this a lot where these franchises that have just struggled for years and years and years make a lot of big changes and everyone says, "Hey, no, this is it. It's just going to click and everything's going to happen." And there are a lot of changes happening right now in New York. New quarterback, new running back, new head coach, new offensive coordinator. So, yeah, on paper it looks great. It looks like they've got a lot of talent there, but whether that can all mesh together and work into a cohesive team that's going to be able to play well, I'm not quite sold yet. So, I am the potential's there, but it's really a team that I am not too interested in fantasy. And I might miss out on some late round value, but I'd rather go after some safer bets than roll the dice on the Jets.
Yeah, and I think so. That idea is really interesting to me, and we'll go off script a little bit here because I think it made me think of the Cleveland Browns. And a few years ago, I mean, you wouldn't have wanted anybody with the Browns associated with the Browns. They were just such a mess. And they bring in the right guy. They bring in Stefanski, and he has really turned that ship around. And like the Kitchens hire was awful, obviously, but then they bring in somebody who knows what they're doing, who's not in over their head. He brings an offense that makes sense for the personnel, and like even like starts to adjust it. And you saw Baker Mayfield making more plays at the end of the year, and not quite as run heavy as Stefanski typically is. So it's like yeah, these organizations, we start thinking about them as what they've been, but sometimes there can be an advantage of thinking about what they could be. And sometimes it's as simple as bringing in the right guy to be the top of the organization. I mean, yet to see if that's going to be what Sela is, but we know that a lot of players like him and believe in him. So
Yeah, I
I don't
mean,
know. It's going to be
he
interesting
got
to see how that works out.
he got that 49ers defense really rallied around him and loving him. So I think his leadership skills are off the chart, and I think that the Jets are really going to like him. Back to Baker Mayfield real quickly though. He's one of those guys that is so disrespected in this community.
Mm.
He's not a great fantasy football player. He's always just going to be that high end QB2. That's kind of what you expect every year he's been in the league, QB 17 to QB 18. You know exactly what you're getting with Baker Mayfield. But man, he's a good real life quarterback, and I feel like the fantasy community doesn't give him the credit. This is a run first team in Cleveland, but I just wish people would start respecting Baker Mayfield a little bit more because he really deserves it.
he in the last year he really came on and looked really good. Like I don't know if he's got like QB5 potential, but like could he finish as a QB1?
Yeah, I think he could, and I don't know if he can with the team that he's currently on, though. You know that Nick Chubb is the first option, Kareem Hunt is the second option, and they just don't put Baker in a position where he has to throw the ball a lot. But I think that if you put Baker on a team like, I don't know, the Broncos or the Saints
Hmm.
or one of these teams that like to throw the ball a little bit more and have some pass catchers, I think he absolutely has the talent to be there. He's just in a position right now where they don't ask him to play hero ball. A lot of what he does is just feeding the rock to Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt.
We've had a couple questions come in here in the chat and on Twitter that we're going to get to here in just a second. Checking in here. Mike says, "What's up? What's up, Mike? Certainly great to see you." He got me in trouble with Dave Richard a little bit yesterday, but we'll talk about that later. And then Matt Dingus checks in. OBJ comeback season incoming. Like, yeah, he's pretty good, and we tend to forget about him. Might even be a guy that we overlook. Swag man. So that says, "What's up?" We haven't seen the "What's up, y'all" yet.
Not yet. It'll
We
come.
haven't got that one in there.
It will happen.
It's
He's
gonna
gonna not
happen.
do it now just to, make fun of me for that tweet, but it's coming. Don't worry.
But let's talk a little bit. Let's start with just your first, before we get into any more of the questions. Just let's talk about your first overlooked player in Dynasty that you think deserves a better look.
I mean, we already talked about him a little bit, but Michael Pittman, he was a
Mm.
34th overall pick in 2020 and didn't really live up to his expectations. But like I said, I don't think that was any fault of his own. He went on injured reserve for a little while, but to finish the season, once he came off of injured reserve, 47.1 yards per game and a 14.1 per reception over his final 9 games. So he's able to make those plays and he can get downfield and really get it done. So I think that Carson Wentz will help him tremendously in 2021. And I think that he is just going to take over as the team's alpha wide receiver. Sometimes you see these great wide receivers that are just getting a quarterback that isn't really suiting what they can do well. We'll talk about Darnell Mooney a little bit later, hopefully. But Michael
Mm-hmm.
Pittman's one of those guys. He's a downfield threat, and Phillip Rivers was unable to push the ball downfield. Michael Pittman reminds me a lot of Mike Williams, actually, who also struggled as Phillip Rivers lost his arm strength. So I'm a big fan of Pittman, and where he's going right now in both redraft and dynasty leagues. I think that he's just a screaming value.
Who else is even going to get targets on that team? Like Nyheim Hines, like maybe Paris Campbell, but it's not like we've ever really seen it with him. And you're right. When you look at the most talented person, as far as wide receiver on their team, it's probably him. Like T.Y. Hilton at this point in his career, unless he's facing the Houston Texans, it's probably not him. But he certainly is going to have every opportunity in front of him. Is Carson Wentz up to the task would be my biggest question. And how do you feel about that?
Oh yeah, I think Carson Wentz. I mean, I love that signing. As a Bears fan, when I knew that Carson Wentz was getting traded, deep down, I really wanted to see him come to Chicago. But in the back of my
Mm.
mind, I knew that this was going to be a position for him to fail. If Carson Wentz came to Chicago, it would have been the same story as the Eagles. They just not the weapons that he needs and no offensive line. And we've seen Carson Wentz get a little gun shy over the last couple of years, where early on in his career, he was standing in the pocket, he was taking those hits, and he was willing to step up in the pocket even and just throw these darts down the field. And then as his offensive line started to fall apart in Philadelphia, you saw him falling over and taking easy sacks and afraid to use his legs. So the upgrade that he gets going from what he had last year in Philadelphia to going to Indianapolis, which I believe is the best offensive line in the league.
Mm.
I think that that's a great fit for him. I've got Carson Wentz slotted in as a low end QB1 this year. I think that he's going to bounce back to the 2018, near MVP version of Carson Wentz that we saw.
He's got a lot of questions to answer, I think. My hope is on that team, they turn around and hand the ball off to Jonathan Taylor a bunch. And why not, right? Like,
yeah.
he's pretty good. We also have Jeff checking in. What's up, Jeff? Definitely great to hear from you. And he's going to be doing this in about 2 weeks. So I'm excited about that. I love Jeff. He's great. Awesome analysis. If you're not following him on Twitter, make sure you are. We got this question coming in, which is it's really interesting to try and sort this out when we think about the Las Vegas Raiders. They got a wide receiver group that I don't know how you rank them right now. And they lost Aguilar over the offseason. They pick up John Brown in his spot, but they got the rookies too that we really didn't get to see as much of as we wanted to in Henry Ruggs and Brian Edwards. We had Hunter Renfrow in the mix somewhere. Like, how do you make sense of this wide receiver core?
Well, first of all, Darren Waller is the wide receiver one in Las Vegas, and that's why you don't really when you look at this depth chart, it's frustrating because like they have so much depth, but they don't have a single guy that really stands out. Like they go 6 or 7 deep with decent wide receivers, but there's nobody that really like makes your eyes pop. So Henry Ruggs, Brian Edwards, Hunter Renfrow, and then even once you get into the depth, like I said, Zay Jones, Willie Snead, John Brown, they've got a lot of great wide receiver two, wide receiver threes, but they don't have that dominant wide receiver one. And I think that's why Darren Waller is such an integral part of that
Mm.
offense. But if I had to pick a single guy that I'm ranking above the rest, it's Henry Ruggs. The guy's just got blazing speed, didn't have a great rookie year, but sometimes those are my favorite guys. You know, after a disappointing rookie year, just like we were talking about Michael Pittman, sometimes you can get those guys for a great value and they bounce back. So I'm not really sold on any of those guys. I know Brian Edwards is the Twitter darling, and I'm probably upsetting a lot of people by not going with Brian Edwards here, but Henry Ruggs would be my number one, Brian Edwards number two, and then Renfro at number three. And I really wish Zay Jones, he was somebody who showed some flashes
Gosh.
earlier on and just never really completely put it together. And it hurts me to say that I've got him as the fourth guy here, but
Mm-hmm.
he's somebody who, like, if you're in a super, super, super deep league, I think that he probably next to Ruggs has the highest ceiling of the rest of them.
Brian Edwards going at wide receiver 65 right now, and Henry Ruggs wide receiver 49 according to the DLF ADP, which is one of the tools that you get to see if you are a premium subscriber. So if you're listening to this and you're not subscribed, make sure you go and subscribe because you get great data like this. And Henry Ruggs at 49, that's right next to Corey Davis, Curtis Samuel 47, Jalen Rager 46, Brandon Cooks 45, Will Fuller 44. That's an interesting group of wide receivers right there, kind of all in that same vein, fast. Maybe not when I think about Corey Davis, but just
Falling fast.
yeah. And so it's like that's kind of you're hoping for some good weeks and you hit right when you put them in your lineup. But I think Ruggs could be more. The fact that they didn't address the wide receiver position more than they did in the offseason, that tells you that like they at least want to continue to roll him out. They didn't replace Aguilar except for with John Brown, which we'll see what we still have left there. But I think if you're the Raiders, you're hoping that it's not John Brown that fills that void, that it's Henry Ruggs.
Right.
Right. So now, of course, Kenyon Drake is going to be the slot receiver. We know that that's going to take place. As weird as that is.
A little bit of sarcasm there. I mean, I don't know exactly. I mean, it's kind of Kenyon Drake, Travis Etienne. I mean, I don't know what we're supposed to expect from these guys next year. I don't know. I think a lot is being made about nothing there. I think these guys are just getting some. I mean, we see it all the time. Le'Veon Bell, Tariq Cohen. We see a lot of these running backs that'll take snaps out of the slot or out wide or whatever. But I don't think that Kenyon Drake is going to be playing wide receiver next year like a lot of people are hoping for.
Such a weird situation. Our boy, Jordan Vanek, he checks in, sent me a message via Twitter with a good question for you in redraft. So we're going back to redraft here. It's okay to talk about that here. At what pick do you believe you'd be willing to take a tight end wide receiver in a 12-team 1QB PPR league? So apparently you're going running back first. At what point are you thinking about tight end wide receiver?
And this, I kind of look at my redraft pretty similarly to how I look at best ball drafts. In best ball, obviously, I'm looking at the boomer bust guys, sliding them up a little bit while I'm sliding the low volume guys down. But I've done a lot of these drafts so far, and I think that Jordan is asking this question because he knows that I love to draft tight ends at the end of the first round. So, Aaron Waller, Travis Kelce are sitting there at the 11th, 12th pick. I have no problem taking one of them and then wrapping around and getting, what I still believe to be some pretty good running backs at the end of the first. So when it comes to wide receiver, I mean, I'm probably just not even touching one until the late second. And the one exception that I'll make, because you've seen my bio, I'm sure, zero wide receiver. That's how I draft. I'm not somebody that likes getting wide receivers early. The one exception I'm making for redraft this year is if it's 16th pick or later and AJ Brown is still available, I will break away from drafting a running back to get myself some AJ Brown.
Because he's the only guy that's he's gonna get like 300 targets from
Yeah,
Tannehill this year.
yeah.
Like,
I looked it up. The record, I believe, is 209, and
yeah, it's in danger.
I think that AJ Brown can topple that this year, especially with the extra game. Sign me up.
Right. Um, Another question here from Alex. Jamar Chase or Trey Lance at the rookie 104 in Superflex PPR 10 teams start 9, 3 wide receivers. I got third place in 2020. So he's got the 104. Now, interesting here to me, typically in Superflex, I would say Trey Lance, but 10 teams, that might change the calculus on this a little bit. What do you think?
And that's what I'm looking at too. First of all, starting 3 wide receivers. Second of all, 10 teams. You know, when you're
Mm-hmm.
getting rid of 2 teams as opposed to the normal 12 team, and then you're playing the with the super flex 2 quarterbacks, that really changes it quite a bit. So I love Trey Lance. I think that he can be a dominant quarterback, especially with like we know what rushing quarterbacks can do, and I think that he's going to rush the ball a lot in San Francisco. So I'm a big fan of Trey Lance, but with it being 10 teams and starting 3 wide receivers, I think I'd lean towards Chase in this one.
Let's get to your second overlooked player in Dynasty leagues. Who else do you have for us?
I'm gonna throw Travis Etienne out there. For some reason, I feel like he's being slept on a little bit. Like people don't want him, and we know the upside that a pass catching running back can bring. So, I mean, we already talked about it, but Urban Meyer didn't draft Etienne to be a wide receiver. Sure, he's taking some snaps there, but I'm not worried about that too much. James Robinson, he was a great story last year, but it hurts to say he has been replaced. And I think that people just need to swallow that and stop holding on to James Robinson. We saw this with Jordan Howard and the Bears. They drafted David Montgomery. Jordan Howard disappeared.
Mm.
We saw it just a few years ago, more recently, with Philip Lindsay, this undrafted guy, and then they brought in Melvin Gordon, and Philip Lindsay just disappeared into the darkness. Teams that are in a rebuild will feed a running back with low draft stock, and then as soon as it comes time to flip that switch from rebuild to contention, that's when they go out and they spend the draft capital. I think the Jaguars think that by bringing in Trevor Lawrence, they're done with the rebuild. They got the number 1 overall pick. They got the generational quarterback that they want. And I think they're ready to flip that switch and hope that they can compete. And that's why they went out and splashed on Etienne with a first round pick. So right now, he's somebody that I am a big fan of. I think that he's going to be the lead back starting week 1 of the 2021 season. And people are just worried about James Robinson. They're worried where he's going to be lining up on the field, worried where Etienne's going to be lining up on the field. And it's silly to me. I think that he should be ranked right up there with Najee Harris.
I can definitely see that. Like I just took him in the third round of a dynasty startup, and I felt like I got a steal there. Like I like having Etienne. My fear with him is that he's going to hurt the value of not only James Robinson, as you mentioned, but also of Laviska Shenault. Because if we're seeing him as a wide receiver, now you're thinking about he's not lining up wide. Now we're thinking about him in that slot receiver role. And they brought in Marvin Jones, who was already going to take a lot of those slot receiver type, snaps because he did that for Detroit with Darrell Bevel last year. So we saw that already. I worry about Travis Etienne cutting into the dynasty value of 2 other dynasty players. And that offense is going to have to be really, really good for all 3 of them to equal up to what they're being drafted at now. Right.
Yeah. And that was tough for me too, because I somewhat expected James Robinson to get replaced. And I was saying that during the offseason. I was beating the drum saying, go out and sell James Robinson. And I caught a lot of flack for it. And sure enough, he got replaced. I was lucky enough in the one league that I did get James Robinson in, I was able to flip him for Joe Mixon. And I am thrilled with that because now I've got Joe Mixon going forward. And
Mm-hmm.
and it's tough to see a story like that where this kid comes undrafted out of Illinois State, where my wife and a lot of my really good friends went. So I've got a soft spot in my heart for Illinois State as well. And to see him put up the season he did, and really, I mean, there was no excuse for them to draft Etienne. They should not have drafted Etienne, but at the end of the day, they did. And it sucks to see for James Robinson. And then yeah, also for Laviska Shenault. He was a guy in these best ball leagues where 7th, 8th round, Laviska Shenault was my go-to. I was drafting him in almost every single one of my drafts, and then Travis Etienne really, really kind of shot him in the leg.
There was an interesting story where it sounded like Urban Meyer, who he really wanted, was Kadarius Toney, and I thought that was an interesting thing. You don't hear a lot of coaches really say that as much, and it makes you think, you know, is that the role? Because Kadarius Toney almost played that like Curtis Samuel type role, when he was with Florida. And so you almost like, gosh, is that like a Percy Harvin type? Like, is that kind of what he's hoping that Travis Etienne can become? But let's talk about the Giants side of that, because you get Kadarius Toney fitting into that group that's already got Sterling Shepard. They've got Evan Ingram, who takes a lot of snaps out of the slot as well. And okay, well, you can move him in. Oh no, they brought in Kyle Rudolph as well. So there's a
don't forget Kelvin Benjamin.
And and yeah, of course, Kelvin Benjamin. But yeah, and Kenny Golladay. Like, you got a lot of interesting things with the Giants. And here to help us break down some of that, Stephanie Smalls.
How's it going, Steph?
Hey, Steph, are you there? Oh, you're on mute.
You're muted.
I did it too. Don't
you guys
worry.
hear me now?
We can
Yeah,
hear you now. It's always tough with that, coming in the middle of a show, no sound check beforehand.
Yeah. Yeah. What's up? She just heard us talking about the Giants and just must have shown up. Like, that's how you get Steffi's attention.
Right. That's how you get attention on Twitter.
Yep. So we were just talking about the show that you guys are doing. Obviously, a lot of great things there. You guys interview some really cool people. So we could talk a little bit about that, but we're also talking about the Giants and how Kadarius Toney fits into that team. And, with Evan Ingram and a lot of times lining up in the slot, you can't really kick him out to the inside to line up in tight end anymore, because you got Kyle Rudolph that's probably going to take some space there. I don't know, like, where does Kadarius Toney fit on this team? Like, all of a sudden there's almost too many weapons for the Giants.
He adds the ultimate weapon that the Giants have lacked for years. That's what he adds, right? So you have Golladay, Shepard, Slayton, Ingram has proven to be who he is, and Rudolph gives you the red zone threat. And then I think that Toney will be that extra drive that they need. So I think that Toney actually adds something that the Giants don't have yet, which is nice for once. It's been years since they've had an extra weapon. So it's actually exciting. I know it was like a surprising pick, and it was for me. But I'm happy with it. I think that if you switched Azeez and Toney, people would not have been as shocked. And then it wouldn't have been as like, oh my God, the Giants did it again. They blew the draft. Did we really blow the draft, or did we just pick Toney before Azeez?
Yeah.
I would just like to, as a Bears fan, I don't think I've officially thanked you yet for that 11th overall pick. So thank you very much for that.
I tweeted, I'm like, it's days like these. I'm just happy for my friends leave as I'm like crying. Like, there's like no way.
So I thought Toney was like an undervalued player. I'm not sure I thought he was the 20th best player of the draft, but like, I thought he was kind of undervalued because he offers a lot, especially on the special team side. He's more physical than you think. Like, he doesn't mind getting after it and run blocking, and like, he'll lower his shoulder. Like, he's not like a Tavon Austin or somebody like that. Like, he's a good football player. And I wonder if that's just something that Joe Judge looked at as a former special teams guy, as kind of just a tough coach. Like, he just liked the toughness that he saw in Toney, and the way he fits into that locker room might be really good.
I think we're seeing too, like, this season, it's funny, I was talking about this with someone like a couple days ago, is like, we're seeing this go back to like 20 years ago, where it was just based on scouting. Like, there was no combine, there was no pro days like this. So we're seeing this, like, you just had to scout players. So I'm wondering how this is going to play out, because I think that we might end up seeing these players that everyone's like, oh my God, I can't believe they took them there, end up being the steals of this draft, because they've based it off of just like basic football, basic scouting, basic film. It's not as combine based as we've seen in the past. So I think this is going to actually be an interesting year where everyone's like, oh, that was such a reach. I don't know if some of these guys that we're saying was a reach. I think they just are scouting the way that we used to 20 years ago.
I haven't heard that yet. That's a really good point. I haven't heard anybody say that yet, but I like that.
Thanks.
Yeah.
No more underwear.
Exactly. So, Steph, we're doing an AMA with Dave. We're talking football, obviously, but we can talk about anything. Like, do you have any questions for Dave?
We need to know why Dave is a Jay Cutler apologist.
We started off the show talking about it a little bit, but
Did we?
I mean, this kid came like he was. I haven't prepped for this question. No, people haven't asked me this in a while. People would ask me this all the time when I was new in this
I was
space.
trying to give you an easy one, dude.
But no, I mean, like he was a Pro Bowler at 25 years old, threw for 4,800 yards his final year in Denver. I mean, I don't know if you understand the amount of excitement that happened when we were in Chicago and I got the call. I was working at Champ Sports, 18 years old, got a phone call and somebody said, "Hey, we just traded for Jay Cutler." And I didn't even think it was true. Like I couldn't believe it. I was just bouncing off the walls with excitement. And then, he would show these flashes throughout his time in Chicago, but they just didn't do anything to build a team around him. They got their franchise quarterback, and then it's like the whole franchise was just a deer in headlights. And they're like, all right, we got this guy. What do we do with him? Like, just, all right, go out there with Devin Hester as your number one receiver and go make some magic. He had no offensive line, and he just fell apart. Like I mentioned it earlier, 87 sacks in his first 2 years is not something that many quarterbacks are going to be able to rebound from. So on top of that, he was with the Bears for 8 years. And in those 8 years, he had 5 different offensive coordinators and 3 different head coaches. That's just nobody's going to be able to succeed in that position. So we saw exactly what it was from Jay Cutler in Denver. He was there for 2 years. He developed in his second year and was a Pro Bowl quarterback. And that was when he peaked. It was all downhill from there after he came to Chicago. I don't think that Jay Cutler was ever a bad quarterback. I think the Chicago fans, the Chicago media, and the Chicago franchise ruined what could have been one of the all-time greats. And that leads me to why I'm a little bit scared with Justin Fields. But
I was going to say, like,
so one thing though. Do you know how many sacks Daniel Jones has had?
Ooh.
Probably pretty close.
83.
Cool.
No, that's brutal. And that's not
so
good for development.
when we all want to hate on Daniel Jones, let's just remember this. Remember Jay Cutler and remember these numbers because Daniel Jones is getting obliterated in the NFL right now.
But can we hit?
I actually didn't know that it was 83 until right now. I looked it up.
But that's a good point though, because like Dave's mentioning that as like, here's why it didn't work for Cutler. Mm-hmm. Like, can we hit that point with somebody like Jones where it's like, or a Carson Wentz, who I don't know what that number is for him, but it's probably high. Like, can you hit that point? I think about David Carr, not Derek Carr, but David Carr with the Texans as being that's the example I always think about. Can you hit that point? And could you hit that point with Daniel Jones that you mentioned? As
Carson Wentz over the last 2 years took exactly as many sacks as Jay Cutler did in his first 87 sacks over the last 2 years for Carson Wentz.
That's a lot.
And that's sitting for a few games too. That's missing games. He still took 87 sacks.
So what gives you confidence that it's not going to go that way for Fields?
I think leadership is a big thing that Jay Cutler lacked. You would see it on the sidelines where he would just have this, things weren't going his way and he would just kind of shut down. And I've heard the complete opposite about Fields, that he really rallied to get the team to be able to play last year at Ohio State. And then even this story that John Helmkamp tweeted out the other day just brought a smile to my face and a little warmness to my heart when they said that the wide receiver was running the wrong route and Fields went out on the field and talked him through it and helped develop him. And that's something that I don't think the Bears, as long as I've been alive, have had a quarterback that was able to take on that leadership role. Mitch Trubisky, he was getting dogged from the day that he was drafted. It was an absolute disaster. I don't know if you remember this. I feel like this is something that didn't really get out of the Chicago media, but he was drafted. Obviously, everyone thought that we were getting Deshaun Watson when the Bears traded up. They took Mitch Trubisky. A few days after he was drafted, he was at a Bulls game at the United Center. They show Mitch Trubisky's face up on the Jumbotron, and the crowd started booing him. So that kid never stood a chance. He never took on that leadership role. And I think that that's one of the traits that Justin Fields has that other people haven't in the past in Chicago. And I'm hoping that he can just be a leader for this team because that's really what they need.
He's got the right charisma. I'll tell you that much. Like he looks and acts the part where you're like, yeah, I can. And look, I know that might sound silly. Everybody's got the right tools, right? Like at this point, it's like you've got if you were drafted in the first round as a quarterback, you've got the right tools. like, what's that separator? Sometimes it's like you carry and you get the confidence of the locker room and they believe in you, and he's got that. And he's also
that's
got
what I'm hoping for.
RF fantasy. Yeah, he's pretty mobile.
Yeah.
That helps.
And this, it almost feels like this rights the wrong that they made in 2017, because once again, they went out and they signed a mediocre veteran quarterback 2 months before the draft. On draft day, they traded up, and in 2017, we all know that they passed on Deshaun Watson for Mitch Trubisky. And when they traded up to the 11th spot, if they took Mac Jones, I was going to punch a hole through my TV. And when they said that they took Justin Fields, I feel like that almost made it better for passing up on Deshaun Watson in 2017.
Almost. Chiefs traded up actually like right in front of the Saints to get Mahomes too. And there was all these rumors that the Saints loved Mahomes. Sean Payton was like in love with him. I don't know how it would have gone with Breeze the last couple of years, but I would have liked to have found out. That's for sure. But so we've talked about like some of your undervalued players and things like that. What's your other one? I want to get Steffi's response to it. I know you had a couple of good ones.
Another undervalued player of mine, Rashod Bateman, and I just tweeted something out about him today. And I don't know where he's at on DLF, but his ranking on Fantasy Pros is disrespectful. I put a bunch of guys that are currently above him: Adam Thielen, Will Fuller, and it just blew my mind that those guys are sitting ahead of Rashod Bateman, who was one of my favorite guys coming into the draft. And I think he might be my most overlooked in Dynasty and Redraft. I just released my Redraft rankings, and I've got him 20 spots higher than the consensus. And I understand, the Ravens are a run-first team, but I think that what they did this offseason is showed that they really want to change that. And they tried doing it last year. Early on in the season, Lamar Jackson wasn't running the ball as much. They tried turning him into a pocket passer. But it's kind of tough to be a pocket passer when your wide receiver room is Marquise Brown, Devin Duvernay, Willie Snead, I think was their third option last year. They didn't really have it. And then they went out this year and they drafted Rashod Bateman. They brought in Sammy Watkins. So I think that, they wanted to do it last year and were unable to because of the surrounding weapons. But I think that Rashod Bateman is exactly what this offense has been missing. And it wouldn't shock me for him to see 140, 150 targets as a rookie.
Steffi, what do you think?
I agree. I think that this is exactly what Lamar needs, right? Like this is what everyone has been waiting for. Everyone wants to pretend like he can't pass the ball. He can obviously pass the ball. He's in the NFL, right? There's a reason why he is in the position that he's in. And here you go. You give him another weapon. This is the weapon he needs. And they're obviously trying to build around that. And I agree with Dave. I think this is a great match. I think this is exactly what Lamar needs to just shut everyone up. And hopefully he does so, because I think that after this year, there's going to be less forgiveness. I think that this is the year that he got forgiven. But after this year, we're not going to see as much of that forgiveness moving forward.
I don't know.
You're right. It does feel like
that. I mean, he's been in the league for 2 years or 3 years now. He's won MVP at 23 years old.
I know, but I don't know why people feel this way.
And people hate on him so much. Like I feel like the disrespect is terrible. And it's that what was it? The precision passing tournament that he was in a few years ago. Anytime somebody wants to make an argument that Lamar Jackson is bad, they just find that one clip from like 3 years ago where he misses that target that was up there. And it's kind of this, it just, he gets the short end of the stick.
So much.
I'm a huge Lamar Jackson fan, and I just can't get behind the Lamar can't throw narrative at all.
No, neither can I. But I feel bad because he's stuck in this spot now. And it's like, this is like they're doing what they can to make sure that gets eliminated. So I hope that it does get eliminated, because he's going to get canceled so fast, which sucks, because I love him. I love Lamar.
And I think maybe from a reputation standpoint, it might, like, I don't know if the Ravens are going to dump him, but like, I guess my biggest fear with Bateman is he is tied to not just Lamar, but to an offense that is built around throwing the ball the least amount of times in the NFL. And, we think about AJ Brown and we use that comparison, but I just don't think people realize, like, the Titans threw the ball almost 500 times last year. It was less than 400 for the Ravens. It was like 398 or right at 400. It was like right. So it was like 100 more pass attempts is a lot with and I think the Titans were like, I don't know, 28th or something like that in the NFL. So they were 32nd and they were that far behind. I have a hard time figuring out how he gets 120 targets. I think Marquise Brown got 100 last year, something like that. I don't know if the volume is going to be there to be what I wanted when I watched Bateman and fell in love with him in college. That's my only. It's more of a disappointment in terms of like if he'd have gone somewhere like Buffalo, for instance, or something, you'd be way more excited.
So, like, I think that early on, and like I said, I think last year the receiving core that Lamar Jackson had to deal with was terrible. And if you look at the first 9 games of the season, he averaged 27.4 pass attempts per game. So they were trying to throw the ball, but they were losing games, unfortunately. You know, they dropped the game to the Patriots, they dropped the game to Pittsburgh, and they had these really tough losses when they were trying to throw the ball. And then on the back half of the season, to close out the season, his final 5 games after he came back from COVID, that's when he started running more. And he only attempted 20 pass per game. So his passing rate or his pass attempt rate dropped almost 50% once they started, they came out of that little losing streak. So again, we heard this last offseason that they want Lamar Jackson to throw the ball more. And I think that they tried to do that last year, but not having the weapons didn't put him in a place to succeed. So I think that this year we'll come out and we'll see something similar to what we saw at the start of last year, where you can see him coming out averaging, 25 to 30 pass attempts per game.
Yeah, I hope you're right. I do hope you're right, because I'd like to see it from Lamar too. I'd like to see him get a chance to throw the ball more and get rid of that feeling like he can't pass the ball. You know what I mean? Like I want him to have that kind of an opportunity. Couple of cool questions coming in from the comments here. Rum Boys Raj, quick question. What kind of value y'all putting on Derrick Henry this year in Dynasty? Seen a bunch of people who are low on him. I think I've seen some tweets from one of the people up here about Derrick Henry's value this year in Dynasty, being low on him. Like a bunch of people are selling him fairly low too. So what are we thinking? Dave, you might have some strong opinions on this subject.
Yeah, this is something that I'm kind of going to bat for. I've written articles for Fantasy Pros about it. And I just, the demise is near for Derrick Henry. And I know people don't want to hear that. But when we look at guys that have hit that 2,000 yard mark, first of all, there's only one player in NFL history that was older than Derrick Henry when they hit the 2,000 yard mark, and that was Barry Sanders. Completely transcendent. Just, we're never going to see another Barry Sanders in the NFL. And on average, players that came off of that 2,000 yard season, I believe it was around 1,100 yards. I'd have to go back. I looked the numbers up a while back. I'll find it and I'll retweet it so anybody watching the show can check out my Twitter after and find it. But I did a deep dive on this, and when you want to talk about red flags, I mean, they are just falling out of Derrick Henry's pockets. Like there are red flags everywhere. You look at his usage, you look at the fact that Arthur Smith is gone. Even Corey Davis, and Jonnu Smith, they lost both of them. And those guys are very underrated run blockers. So I am very much so in the fade Derrick Henry camp. Speaking towards his dynasty value, that's not something, there's a lot of savvier, sharper dynasty players out there that can put a pick value on Derrick Henry. That's not something I feel comfortable doing, but he's somebody that I'm definitely fading. Heading into redraft, he's my current RB10, which I don't know if there's many people that are much lower than that.
See, okay, so that's interesting because Dynasty, I'm 100% on board with what you're saying. Redraft, what else are they going to do? They've got to run the ball. Like they've got AJ Brown, who they're going to break a record with this year. We already decided that earlier in the show. And you've got Derrick Henry, who's going to run the ball. Like Josh Reynolds, is he going to get 100 targets?
Right. And I realize that they're going to have to run the ball a lot just because of the makeup of the team. But I think a lot of the reason that they ran the ball was because of Arthur Smith. It wasn't ever that Ryan Tannehill isn't a good passer. It's just that's what their offensive coordinator wanted to do. And I think that, we're going to see similar usage from Mike Davis next year. I think that Mike Davis could easily see 250 carries because that's what Arthur Smith wants to do. But I'm with you. It is definitely one of those, like, who else is on the team? Like, and I don't know. I don't know if we're going to see Derrick Henry get 300 carries and AJ Brown get 200 targets. I mean, they have to figure something else out, whether it's Anthony Ferguson or Josh Reynolds, or maybe even bringing in, I don't know, but I know that the tread is running thin on those tires right now. And I like to be ahead of the curve. I'd
Mhm.
rather, ship him off and get something a little bit younger or some picks right now than keep him this year, watch that fall off happen, and then midway through the season, try to salvage whatever I can for him.
I think you're right. Now you mentioned Mike Davis, some pictures going around about him on the internet. That was pretty interesting. And we happen to have another guest stopping by.
Hey, what's up,
What
man?
up? What's
Little
going
sneak peek
on?
at tomorrow's show. What's happening, man?
What's up, y'all?
What's up, y'all? You know how to come and say what's up, y'all, real quick, man. Dave made that post about me, so I had to drop in and say what's good.
Troy, thanks for joining us, man. We're doing an AMA here with Dave. We're talking about some undervalued players in Dynasty. So, quick question: who's the most undervalued player in Dynasty right now for the Miami Dolphins?
Ooh, undervalued? Probably, I gotta say Devonta Parker. I'll go Devonta Parker. You know why? Because everybody's expecting, right, Will Fuller or expecting Jalen Waddle to step in there and be wide receiver one. Tua has at least some rapport with Devonta Parker, right? He's still going to be involved. He's not going away. So to me, I wouldn't be surprised if honestly Devonta Parker might be the target guy. Maybe he's going to be relied on for the targets, and then Will Fuller, he might be the down the field threat. And Jalen Waddle, he's going to be a yak monster, but maybe he doesn't rack up targets. So Devonta Parker is, obviously people don't want to, for some reason, people don't want to give him credit, right? Obviously 2 years ago, he had that breakout. Last year, dealt with injuries, but he was fine when he was on the field. So I'll go him.
That's a good, there was a time where he had a stretch where he was one of the best wide receivers in football just a couple of years ago. So, we'll see if he can, come anywhere close to that.
I'll never forget that. Devonta Parker putting up wide receivers 7 numbers on the back half of the year.
People don't want to talk about it, man.
People are still writing that man off as a bust. He might have been a slow starter, but Devonta Parker is a beast. And I couldn't agree with Troy more on this one.
So it's an AMA also where we're asking Dave questions. Do you have any questions that you would like to ask Dave?
Oh, yes, I do have a question. So, Dave, do you think that Justin Fields is going to end his career being the best Bears quarterback you ever had?
That's a great question. Yeah, I mean, when the bar is set as low as it is, do you know what Justin Fields has to do to become the best Bears QB? He needs one season where he can pass for 4,000 yards because no Bears quarterback has done that in Bears history. That's it. That's the bar. 4,000 yards. You hit 4,000 yards, you're the best quarterback in Bears history. And I think that it is pretty certain that he will hit that mark within his first few years.
Doesn't have to be Dan Marino, that's for sure. Troy, tell us a little bit about your show, you and Dave tomorrow. And then I know, I appreciate you hopping on. I know you can't stay long, but anything about your show, tell us where we can find it and what it's going to be about. And just sell us on it.
Of course. So where you can find it on Football Guys, you can find it on the YouTube channel, be streaming through there. But essentially it's going to be similar to this. Dave and I are going to be answering questions, mailbag questions. So we have the mailbag email, so mailbag@footballguys.com. If you have any questions, you can shoot an email there or just comment on any of the posts that Dave and I, be tweeting out. But overall, if you just have any redraft or dynasty questions or best ball questions, that's what we're here. We're here to help you out. We're here to give you some direction. We're here to maybe to disagree. Hopefully we agree on most of the stuff, but that's really what it's about. So you can find it on Wednesdays at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're here to help you with all your questions. So hit us up and make sure and we're going to be live streaming too. So make sure you watch the live stream tomorrow.
When I saw you guys were going to do a show together, I was like, yeah, of course they are. That makes sense. Yes, that needs to happen. I'm so glad that we get to have that. Dave, what were you going to say? Sorry, I cut you off.
That was it. Just saying that this show has been a long time coming. When I was brand new to Twitter, I was like, man, who is this dude that is on my timeline everywhere? I was like, and I hit him up and I was just like, hey, what's up, man? I'm new to these Twitter streets. And Troy and I just hit it off immediately. And we were just friends from the get-go. It wasn't that long ago that I actually went back. I scrolled all the way up in our DMs and found the first conversation we ever had. And Troy and I, that's just you've been my guy since day one. You've been supporting me since I showed up here. Forever thankful for it, and I am so happy that we finally get an opportunity to do this show together.
I'll say that in terms of any of the transformations from like day one till now in the fantasy industry, it's Dave. Talk
Yeah.
about Dave exploding from when he first DM'd me, hitting me up, kind of like asking for basic advice till now. Like, I can't keep up with this dude in terms of all the shows he does, his tweets getting 1 million likes a tweet. So shout out to Dave. Man, Calvin, thank you so much for having me on. You'll see me on the Twitter streets. Make sure to tune in tomorrow for the Mailbag Show, and y'all have a good night.
Thanks,
Sir,
Troy.
See you tomorrow, man.
Of course, man.
Party
So yeah,
up
a
in here,
couple
Cal. I
surprises
didn't know
for
we
you
were
there,
doing all
Dave.
this. What was that?
A couple surprises for you there.
Yeah, I didn't know we were having a party here tonight. I should have grabbed a drink beforehand.
Nate checked in. What's up, y'all? Sorry I'm late. I'm a little late pulling that up. Sorry. Nate's awesome. Like I love he's just great on Twitter. Alex, Steffi had to jump off, but top 5 in the Superflex rookie draft. You want to answer that real quick? Who do you think, if you have a Superflex rookie draft for Dynasty, who are you looking at?
I'm going with Lawrence first, Fields second, and I know earlier we were saying to go with Jamar Chase, but assuming this is a 12-team, normal redraft, I'd go Fields third, and then Jamar Chase and Kyle Pitts. That's my top 5.
Yeah, I'm
not on the Pitts train like everybody else is. People that are taking him 101.
Yeah,
I like the upside, but how many first-round tight ends are we going to fall in love with? Like, it's an abusive relationship at this point between the dynasty community and first-round tight ends, and they just keep going back for more.
Yeah, Chase and him, I think, I like that you mentioned them over Najee, because to me that is like I would take them over Najee, because Najee is older than you think. But those two guys, like the longevity, and I'd put Zach Wilson up there too. I'd Trey Lance over him. He'd be my 4, but I just kind of like what I'm seeing in Wilson. And I think he's one of those guys. We always have somebody that we didn't expect it with Justin Herbert, right? Like Justin Herbert surprised everybody. He just feels that way to me. That's a little bit of a gut thing, and a little bit of just kind of thinking about his game and how he fits in with that team. And I kind of like it.
Yeah, it could certainly work out. The dude's got crazy arm talent. You can't deny what Zach Wilson can do.
Yep. Nate chimes in. Ravens number 2 wide receiver was Willie Snead. That does say a lot, right? Like Willie Snead is not exactly known for. I don't know. Has he ever been rostered in fantasy in any meaningful level?
Marquise Brown was the number 1 too. Like not only did he have it's not like there was just this big fall off. Like he had no talent last year. Like we were talking about Darren Waller being the number 1 wide receiver in Raiders. That's pretty much what Mark Andrews was last year.
And I do actually a lot of people are just not talking about Sammy Watkins. Our theme is overlooked. There's a chance Sammy Watkins is a little overlooked because he does have some history with Greg Roman going back to their Buffalo Bills days. So rejoining there, he'll know the offense, he'll be able to pick up things, and he's got some trust from the offensive coordinator already. So I think there's some interesting things there with Sammy Watkins.
Yeah, it was tough for him in Kansas City. That's just a loaded roster that he was never really able to carve out a role. He went into a team that already had everything clicking and then tried to find a role in there. And that's a tough thing to do. But man, people have a very short memory in fantasy football. Recency bias is something that I love taking advantage of. And people forget Sammy Watkins in Buffalo was a wide receiver 1 and a very, very good one. So I'd love to see him bounce back.
Tua scored more fantasy points per game with Parker healthy and on the field. And that's the key, right? The health. So knowing your list a little bit about who your undervalued or overlooked players are, speaking of health, let's talk a little bit about Zack Moss, because injuries certainly seem to be preventative for him last year. Why do you think fantasy owners are overlooking Zack Moss?
Because he sucked last year. It's pretty easy to understand why people are overlooking him. But everything that's happened this offseason has proven that they want to roll out Zack Moss again next year. They could have signed Aaron Jones, Chris Carson. They could have even brought in Kalen Ballage or James Conner or some of these other guys. They didn't bring in Matt Breida, I believe, right? Was it Matt Breida? That was the guy that they brought in. Yep. Yeah, that's not a lot of competition. So I think that it is still Zack Moss's job for the taking. They could have drafted a running back, and they chose to forego that as well. Zack Moss had that toe injury last year. So we already knew it was going to be tough for some rookies to get up to speed. Well, at least that was the narrative. And then every rookie just came out and smashed last year and made us all look like fools. But, Zack Moss didn't get his preseason, had a toe injury to start the year. And I think he was just never really able to get up to NFL speed. I don't think that Zack Moss is an unbelievable talent. He's not somebody that really excites me when I watch him that much. I mean, he is the definition of a plotter. But I don't hate any player specifically. And when you look at the value right now that you can get Zack Moss for, I did a startup the other day where I got Zack Moss in the 15th round of a startup. And this is the lead running back on an explosive offense, and he's still young. So give me that all day. I mean, is he somebody that I'm excited about to have? No. Is he somebody that is a great 5th running back option? Absolutely.
So you could tell early on in the season they weren't ready to like just hand things over from Devin Singletary to him. I was looking at their snap counts earlier today, but eventually by I think it was week 8, and he, Zack Moss struggled with some injuries, so he was kind of coming back from some of that. By week 8, for the remainder of the season, in 6 of the 9 games, he outsnapped Devin Singletary. One of them they tied, and that was week 17, which they didn't really take super seriously anyway. And then the other week, or one of the weeks, he got hurt. So then there was another one that was really close. So like, it seemed like the plan was to get him in there, work him in there, build up confidence, build up trust, work in the system, learn the system, probably learn pass block, things like that. But even with all that, he still had the same amount of opportunities inside the 5-yard line that Josh Allen did. Now,
that's what I just pulled up. That's exactly what I was looking at, because that blew my mind the other day when I looked at it. He had 8 red zone attempts, or eight attempts inside the 5-yard line. So like, he's the guy that they want to give the ball to, and he got stuffed a few times last year, which is unfortunate to see, but the team wants to give him the ball at the goal line.
And if he can be more efficient with it, I think he only scored 3 of those from inside the 5. So if he can be more efficient with it, then yes. If he can't, and they keep trusting, because what would you rather do? Have your franchise quarterback take those hits, or have Zack Moss take those hits? You'd rather Zack Moss take those hits, right?
Right.
But if he can't be efficient with it, then you're going to want the guy that's going to put the ball in the end zone. So if he can stay healthy, if he can be more efficient at the goal line, I think he's going to be a real value for us this year.
Yeah, I completely agree. And he's somebody that wasn't even really on my radar until I started doing some mocks and some startups. And I was like, wait, you're telling me that I can get this guy consistently in the 12th, 13th, 14th, even 15th round in some cases? And yeah, that's just that value is way too good to pass up.
Right. We're coming up on an hour, and we'll wrap this up. True North Nate, who is awesome on Twitter as well, sign up for Dave's Best Ball League today.
All right.
Hopefully we'll get to know each other better.
I sent a tweet out this morning saying, what's FC Eliminator? And 2 hours later, I had one filled. So looking forward to it. All the guys that signed up for that.
That's awesome. So yeah, hopefully you guys do connect, because Nate's good people. So another comment in here off of YouTube. Would you rather have Tyler Lockett or the 108? Adds in, it's a 1 QB league, 14 teams. So 108, I'll pull that up, but you're probably looking at Sermon, Rondale Moore. I think that's about where the ADP would say, but I'll pull that up. Who would you rather, Lockett or that 108?
I am a Tyler Lockett truther, and there aren't many of us, thinking Arrested Development. Like, there are dozens of us, but I love Tyler Lockett, and I think that he gets an unfair shake every single year. He's somebody that I consistently just go out and acquire shares of. And this offseason, they signed him to a 5-year deal. So he is locked up in Seattle through age 31. Something that still, like I say this all the time, and it blows people's mind. Tyler Lockett had more targets last year than DK Metcalf. Obviously, DK Metcalf is the much better football player, but Tyler Lockett is an integral part of that offense. And the connection that he and Russell Wilson have is just one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in my life. Like, I don't understand how. Like, I see Russell Wilson make this throw, and it looks like he's trying to throw the ball like over the Jumbotron, and then somehow it just drops right into Lockett's hand. I mean, they've been working on that connection for a long, long time. And he's somebody that is just consistently overlooked. I'm a big Tyler Lockett fan, so I'd prefer Lockett in that situation.
It's so funny how sometimes on these shows, like, things work themselves back in. Like, and there's like these themes. So the 108, of course, according to ADP, most recent ADP on DLF is Rashod Bateman. Who would you rather, Tyler Lockett or Rashod Bateman?
Man, you're making me pick two guys that I really, really like here. Man, that's a tough one because I like ETN too, and if ETN's there at 108, that changes things up a little bit. Yeah, I'm going with Lockett though.
Yeah, I'm such a Lockett fan, and they locked him into a long-term deal, and you got DK Metcalf, obviously, that they're, but like you said, like I think Lockett's the guy that Russell Wilson looks for when he gets in trouble. Like he's like that security blanket. Like they have such a good connection. He knows where he's going to be, and he's able to complete a lot of passes that way. So I'm with Lockett, you. I like Lockett too.
He was always known as like a deep ball threat, but he's kind of taken over that Doug Baldwin role too, where he takes a lot of his snaps out of the slot. He's not afraid to catch balls over, and he does still have that deep ball threat, but he's just all over the field nowadays.
Last question that we'll ask you, and then we'll let you get out of here, Dave. One quarterback trading back from the 101 to the 103. What should I look for in return? I received a 2023 first and second. Own Taylor, Dobbins, and Swift, hoping for one of Pitts or Chase at 103. Like those would be the two that I would want too. And if it can work out where you get those and you get them at the 103 instead of the 101, and you get a 2023 first and second, I like that. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what he's asking for. What is he hoping for to move back? Is he asking for like whether it be another pick or a player? There's a lot of guys that I'm just going to be completely honest. When it comes to the Dynasty community, there's so many people out there that are sharper than me that can put, actual valuation on each picks. They change year to year. I'm somebody, when I play Dynasty, I go by my gut a lot. And, I can't really put a value on exactly what you need to trade back from 101 to 103.
Yeah, to me, that would be Aaron. I think that's a good deal because you've got Pitts, you've got Chase, and then you take your choice of Najee or ETN, whoever you like. I think I like ETN in that spot. But if you have the same valuation where you want one of those three guys and you can pick up something of value and only move back two spots, then yeah, like that's a good strategy.
I just read it, what I realized. So he moved back two spots and got a first and a second in. Yeah, I mean that's an amazing deal. I mean that's
and even
exactly what you want.
Even if Chase and Pitts go 1-2, which does that would be going against ADP, and you wind up with one of ETN or Harris. Like, don't draft based on need anyway. Like, draft based on talent. Draft the best player. Trade for need. You don't have to set a lineup until September. It's fine. Like, don't worry about it. Don't stress. So with that, we are going to let you get out of here, Dave. We had a lot of fun, had some guests, had some surprises, talked about some players. We got smarter and got excited about what you're doing for sure over with Football Guys, with some of your shows and your show there with Steffi. So yeah, just one last time, tell us a little bit about like what you have going on and where we can find you and support you for anybody who didn't get it the first time.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Dave Kluge. I'm not going to run through my whole schedule again, but if there's one show you want to check out, tomorrow, 7:30 p.m., me and Troy King, we're going to be on the Football Guys YouTube page, youtube.com/footballguystv. We'll be answering mailbag questions and live questions. So tomorrow, 7:30 p.m. Eastern time, be sure to tune in.
And you can follow me at Calvin and Hobby. You can follow the Dynasty League Football page at DL Football. That is down below. And also, if you're watching this video, just look real quick and make sure that you're subscribed to this page, because you need to be subscribed to this page. To hit the notification button, make sure you know when we're going live. We're doing a bunch of these with some really smart people. I'm really excited about some of the announcements, but I can say that this Thursday will be a trade version of this show. So any trade questions that you have, be sure to bring them. We're going to have Russ Fisher, Dynasty Outhouse. We're going to have Bob Gilchrist and John Bosch joining us to talk trades. It's going to be a lot of fun. Excited about that. If you are not subscribed, make sure you do that. Notifications, like this video, comment, tell us what we got right, tell us what we got wrong. If we got really wrong, it's probably Dave's fault, so you can DM him on Twitter. But outside of that, we will talk to you guys later and see you on the next